What if the person you trusted most became the architect of your worst nightmare? On a quiet March night in 1998, a beloved grandmother opened her door in Lexington, Kentucky, never imagining it would be for the last time. By sunrise, her home was ransacked, her car was missing, and the woman who had survived decades of hardship and built a life of dignity was gone without a trace. The crime stunned a city and left a family shattered. But what truly set this case apart was the betrayal at its core. The killers weren't strangers. They were people she once welcomed into her home. Tonight, we unravel a story of trust broken, justice pursued, and a legacy that refused to be silenced. Stay with us as we follow every twist in the murder of Lonetta Pennman White, a case that would make Kentucky history and leave questions echoing for decades. Lonetta Pennman White was the kind of woman whose story could fill a family album, one of 14 children, born in the heart of Kentucky during the era of segregation. Her childhood in Danville was shaped by the bustle of a big family and the challenges of the Jim Crow South, but also by the strength and closeness that only such times could forge. She attended Bate High School, a beacon of black education and pride in her small town, and went on to further her studies at Kentucky State College, a historically black institution that nurtured her drive for achievement and community. Lonetta's adult life was a testament to perseverance and ambition. She built a respected career at GTE Financial, rising through the ranks in an era when opportunities for black women were hard-won. Colleagues remembered her for her vibrant style, bright dresses, bold accessories, and a signature mink coat that spoke to both her success and her flair. Her retirement party, captured in a newspaper photo, shows a woman celebrated by friends and co-workers, her smile radiant and her spirit unmistakable. Marriage took Lonetta from Kentucky to Chicago, where she joined her husband, George White, a businessman with his own ambitions. Their life together brought her into the heart of a thriving urban black community. And though George's passing in 1990 left her a widow, Lonetta's resilience never wavered. She returned to Kentucky in 1993, settling in Lexington's Bryanwood Parkway, a peaceful suburban neighborhood where she hoped to enjoy her golden years. Family was always at the center of Lonetta's world. She was a devoted mother to her son Stephen and maintained close ties with her siblings, who would later stand by her through unimaginable loss. Her compassion extended beyond blood. She opened her home to those in need, including Stephen's ex-fiancée, offering shelter and support even when it came at personal cost. Faith anchored Lonetta's life. As an active member of Holy Tyree Community AME Church, she was a familiar face at Sunday services, known for her generosity and warmth. Friends and family described her as loving, vibrant, and deeply principled, a woman who never hesitated to help others and whose laughter could fill a room. This was Lonetta Pennman White, a survivor, a trailblazer, and a cherished soul whose legacy endures in the hearts of those who knew her. March 14th, 1998, dawned like any other late winter day in Lexington. The chill was still in the air, but the promise of spring lingered just beyond the horizon. For Lonetta Pennman White, it was a weekend of familiar routines and small comforts. She spent time in her cozy home on Bryanwood Parkway, perhaps tidying up, tending to her keepsakes, or making calls to her sisters and friends. Her son Stephen was around the house, and the quiet rhythm of their lives played out in the gentle hum of the neighborhood. That Saturday, Lonetta likely prepared for Sunday church, laying out a favorite dress or checking in with fellow parishioners. She may have looked forward to seeing her sisters or catching up with neighbors. There was no sign that anything was amiss, no warning that her life, so carefully rebuilt after years of hardship, was about to be upended. March 15th, 1998, began like any other Sunday for Lonetta Pennman White. By the early morning hours, her home on Bryanwood Parkway was quiet. She was alone. Her son Stephen was not there that night. What Lonetta couldn't have known was that, As she prepared to rest, two people were making their way to her doorstep with intentions that would forever alter the course of her family's history. Just days earlier, Lonetta had shown compassion, even in the face of conflict. She had given Virginia Caudle, her son's ex-fiancée, money for a hotel room after asking her to move out, due to a heated argument over drug use. But the kindness Lonetta extended would be repaid with betrayal. In the pre-dawn darkness, Virginia Caudle returned to Lonetta's home. This time, not alone, but with an old acquaintance, Jonathan Wayne Goforth. Both were desperate, strung out, and in search of money for drugs. They approached Lonetta's door, and when she answered, what happened next was both brutal and deeply personal. The two forced their way inside. Accounts differ on the exact sequence, but what's clear is that Lonetta was attacked with a hammer. The blows were fatal, delivered by hands she once trusted. The violence was swift, the motive painfully simple: robbery. Caudle and Goforth ransacked the home, searching for anything of value. They took jewelry, 2 guns, and Lonetta's prized mink coat, a symbol of her years of hard work and self-respect. But the horror did not end there. To cover their crime, the pair wrapped Lonetta's body in a carpet and stuffed her into the trunk of her own car. They loaded the stolen goods into Goforth's truck and drove both vehicles to a remote field outside Lexington. There, in a final act of cruelty, they set Lonetta's car ablaze, hoping the fire would erase all traces of their actions. By the time the flames were discovered, the perpetrators were already gone, on the run, leaving behind a devastated family and a community in shock. The scene investigators found was grim. A burned-out car, the remains of a woman who had survived so much in life, now the victim of an unimaginable betrayal. The brutality and calculated nature of the crime stunned even seasoned detectives. The morning of March 15, 1998, brought a chilling silence to Bryanwood Parkway. Lonetta Pennman White's home, usually alive with phone calls and family visits, was eerily quiet. When her son Stephen and other relatives couldn't reach her, worry quickly set in. It wasn't long before the police were called to check on her well-being. Their search led them to a remote field outside Lexington, where smoke curled into the sky from a burning car. Inside the charred trunk, investigators made a grim discovery: the remains of a woman, later identified as Lonetta, wrapped in a carpet. The scene was devastating, the violence unmistakable. The car, her own, had been deliberately torched in an attempt to destroy evidence and erase what had happened. News of the crime spread rapidly through the community and Lonetta's extended family. Shock and disbelief rippled through her church congregation and the neighborhoods she'd called home. Lonetta's sisters, Alma and Mamie, rushed to Lexington, desperate for answers and to support Stephen, who was reeling from both his mother's murder and the betrayal by his former fiancée. In those first days, the family's grief was compounded by confusion and fear. Who could have done this, and why? As investigators began to follow the trail, the community rallied around Lonetta's loved ones, offering prayers, meals, and the hope that justice would soon be served. The investigation into Lonetta Pennman White's murder began in the early hours after her body was discovered, sending shockwaves through Lexington's law enforcement and community. Detectives arrived at the remote field where Lonetta's burned car was found, the trunk concealing a horror that would haunt even seasoned officers. The crime scene was meticulously processed. Investigators collected blood, hair, and fragments of personal belongings, including traces of Lonetta's prized mink coat. The deliberate attempt to destroy evidence with fire signaled to detectives that this was more than a random act. It was calculated, desperate, and deeply personal. Back at Bryanwood Parkway, police found Lonetta's home ransacked. Drawers were pulled open, jewelry boxes emptied, and 2 guns missing. The scene told a story of chaos and greed, but also of familiarity. There were no signs of forced entry, suggesting Lonetta may have let her killers in. This detail immediately narrowed the focus to people she knew and trusted. Detectives began interviewing family, friends, and neighbors. Stephen White, Lonetta's son, was distraught and cooperative, providing crucial context about recent tensions in the household. He explained that just 2 days before the murder, he had asked his ex-fiancée, Virginia Caudle, to move out after a heated argument over her drug use. Lonetta, ever compassionate, had given Caudle money for a hotel room. Detectives learned that Caudle had a troubled history: substance abuse, brushes with the law, and a pattern of manipulation. Attention quickly turned to Caudle and her recent associate, Jonathan Wayne Goforth, a man with a criminal record for robbery and drug offenses. Both were known to be struggling with addiction and were now missing. Police issued warrants for their arrest, placing them on the list of Kentucky's most wanted fugitives. The urgency of the case grew as days passed, with no sign of the suspects. Forensic teams worked tirelessly to analyze the evidence. DNA from the crime scene and the burned car linked Caudle to the killing. Blood and hair samples, including human hair and distinctive mink hairs, were recovered from the vehicle. The stolen guns were later found dumped in a Kentucky river, further tying the suspects to the crime. The investigation gained national attention when, in October 1998, the case was featured on the true crime series America's Most Wanted. The show aired a public appeal, broadcasting the story and the faces of Caudle and Goforth to millions. Tips began to pour in, but the fugitives remained elusive, crisscrossing state lines and using aliases to evade capture. Detectives traced their movements. After the murder, Caudle and Goforth fled Kentucky, traveling first to Ocala, Florida, then to Gulfport, Mississippi. For months, they stayed just ahead of law enforcement. Caudle eventually left Goforth in Gulfport and made her way to New Orleans, Louisiana, where she was arrested in November 1998 under the alias Kelly Lyons, thanks to a tip from a fellow inmate who recognized her from America's Most Wanted. Goforth's arrest followed weeks later in Mississippi after police received a tip about his whereabouts. Both were extradited to Kentucky to face charges. The investigation had been relentless, piecing together a trail of evidence and betrayal that stretched across state lines and back into the heart of Lexington. As the suspects sat in jail, the community waited for answers and for justice. The investigation's thoroughness and the national spotlight it received underscored the gravity of Lonetta White's murder and the determination of those seeking to bring her killers to account. As detectives began to piece together the events leading up to Lonetta Pennman White's murder, the focus quickly shifted to two individuals whose troubled paths had unexpectedly converged: Virginia Susan Caudle and Jonathan Wayne Goforth. Virginia Caudle was no stranger to hardship. Born in 1960, she was the middle child in a family marked by instability. Her father's alcoholism and abuse left deep scars, and she struggled to fit in at school, facing ridicule for her appearance and perceived slowness. As an adult, Caudle's life spiraled into cycles of addiction, prostitution, and failed relationships. She was married twice, became a mother, and later a grandmother, but her years were marred by substance abuse and brushes with the law. By 1998, her relationship with Stephen White, Lonetta's son, had ended in turmoil over her drug use, leaving her desperate and isolated. Jonathan Goforth, also born in 1960, grew up in rural Jessamine County, Kentucky. Unlike Caudle, his early years were described as stable. He was the youngest of three, known for his skills as a carpenter and plumber. Yet, adulthood brought its own challenges. Goforth developed a criminal record for robbery and drug offenses, earning the nickname Heavy for his imposing size. By the time he reconnected with Caudle, he too was struggling with addiction and financial instability. Theories about the crime's motive centered on a toxic mix of desperation and opportunity. Both suspects were addicted to drugs and in urgent need of money. Caudle, recently evicted from Lonetta's home, knew the layout, the valuables, and, critically, how to gain her trust at the door. Goforth, newly reunited with Caudle after years apart, became her accomplice in a plan that would escalate from robbery to murder. Yet, even as police closed in, the truth about what happened inside Lonetta's home remained murky. Caudle and Goforth each offered conflicting accounts, blaming one another for the fatal attack. Caudle claimed Goforth struck the deadly blows and forced her to help cover up the crime, while Goforth insisted Caudle masterminded the plan and wielded the hammer herself. Their stories diverged further when jailhouse informants testified that Caudle had confessed to the killing, though the details varied with each account. One said she used a wall clock, another said she was caught in the act of burglary. The he said, she said nature of their defense became a central theme at trial. Prosecutors argued that both were equally culpable, united by motive and action. The jury would ultimately have to weigh not only the physical evidence, but also the tangled web of addiction, betrayal, and shifting blame that defined the relationship between Caudle and Goforth. In the end, the case against them was built on a foundation of broken trust, both in their personal lives and in their final, violent collaboration. Theories about who delivered the fatal blow would persist, but for Lonetta's family, the tragedy was the same. Two people she once welcomed into her home had destroyed it from within. The shock of Lonetta Pennman White's murder rippled far beyond the walls of her Bryanwood Parkway home. In Lexington's Black community, news of her death landed like a thunderclap. Lonetta was not just another victim, but a beloved neighbor, a pillar of Holy Tyree Community AME Church, and a symbol of perseverance for those who knew her story. Church members gathered in hushed circles, sharing memories and prayers, struggling to comprehend how such violence could strike someone so gentle and giving. The Sunday after her death, the congregation's grief was palpable. Voices cracked during hymns, and the pastor's words lingered on the need for justice and healing. Neighbors, many of whom had known Lonetta since her return to Lexington, were stunned by the brutality and betrayal at the heart of the crime. The idea that someone from within her own circle could be responsible left many feeling unsettled and fearful. In the days that followed, neighbors organized support for the White family, delivering meals, offering rides, and keeping a steady presence at the house. Lonetta's sisters, Alma and Mamie, became points of contact for the family, fielding calls and coordinating with investigators, all while grappling with their own heartbreak. The case quickly drew local media attention, with the Lexington Herald-Leader publishing updates on the investigation and highlighting Lonetta's legacy as a successful Black professional and community leader. As details emerged about the suspects and the shocking nature of the crime, the story made headlines across Kentucky. The narrative of a respected elderly woman murdered in her own home, allegedly by someone she had once sheltered, resonated with readers and viewers alike. As the trial approached, the community braced for answers, but also for more surprises. The wheels of justice turned swiftly and decisively in the aftermath of Lonetta Pennman White's murder. After months of investigation, manhunts, and national attention, the case against Virginia Caudill and Jonathan Goforth moved to the courtroom, a place where the full weight of their actions would be measured, and the community's demand for accountability would finally be addressed. On February 17, 2000, a Kentucky jury found both Caudle and Goforth guilty of first-degree murder, first-degree robbery, first-degree burglary, tampering with physical evidence, and second-degree arson. The evidence was overwhelming. Forensic analysis had tied them to the crime scene, the stolen valuables, and the burned car. Both defendants had tried to shift blame, each painting the other as the mastermind and the hand behind the fatal blows. But the jury saw through the tangled stories and conflicting testimonies. The verdict was unanimous. What followed was even more extraordinary. On the same day, the jury recommended the death penalty for both Caudle and Goforth, a decision that would make Kentucky history. It was a rare and powerful moment. For the first time in the state's modern era, white defendants were sentenced to death for the murder of an African American victim. The symbolism was not lost on anyone in the courtroom. Lonetta's sisters, Alma and Mamie, were present to hear the decision, their grief mixed with a sense of vindication. Mamie spoke for the family, insisting that both killers should face the full consequences for the brutal betrayal and loss they had inflicted. The sentencing itself was marked by raw emotion. Caudle broke down in court and had to be led away, while Goforth reportedly smiled as the sentence was read. Family members from both sides made impassioned pleas. Caudle's daughter begged for her mother's life, asking for mercy and a chance at redemption, while Goforth's sister maintained his innocence. Even Caudle addressed the judge directly, vowing to spread the word of God if given a chance for life. But the judge, aligning with the jury's recommendation, showed no leniency. On March 24, 2000, both were formally sentenced to death, with additional 65-year prison terms for the lesser charges. The legal battle did not end there. Over the next 2 decades, Caudle and Goforth filed a series of appeals, contesting their convictions and sentences at every level, from the Kentucky Supreme Court to the U.S. Supreme Court and federal appellate courts. Each appeal was denied. The original verdicts and sentences upheld time and again. As of 2025, both remain on Kentucky's death row. Caudle at the Kentucky Correctional Institution for Women, the only woman there for more than 20 years. Goforth at the Kentucky State Penitentiary. Yet, the story remains unfinished. Kentucky has not carried out an execution since 2008, and a moratorium remains in place due to ongoing legal challenges over lethal injection protocols. Both Caudle and Goforth have no scheduled execution dates, their cases lingering in legal limbo. The case has continued to draw public attention, featured in documentaries and true crime series, and cited in discussions about race, justice, and the death penalty in America. For Lonetta's family, the verdict brought a measure of closure, but the sense of loss endures. The case stands as a stark reminder of how trust can be shattered, and how the pursuit of justice can shape not only the lives of those directly involved, but also the broader community and legal landscape. Lonetta Pennman. White's story is a powerful reminder of how trust, resilience, and community can shape a life, and how betrayal can change everything in an instant. As we close this case, we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on the investigation, the verdict, or the legacy Lonetta left behind? Do you believe justice was truly served, or are there lessons here that still resonate today? Share your reflections and theories in the comments below. Your voice matters, and your insights help keep these stories alive. If you found this case compelling, please consider subscribing for more in-depth true crime stories that honor the lives behind the headlines. And if you know someone who would be moved by Lonetta's story, share this video and help us keep her memory alive. Thank you for watching, and stay safe.